Welcome to the History AI Podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome back to the History AI Podcast, the show where the past gets a little weird, a little wonderful, and occasionally a little petty.
Which, to be fair, is also how I describe most group chats.
Before we jump in, if you like what we do here, hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Seriously, those 5 stars help the podcast grow, they help new listeners find us, and they make Marco feel powerful.
I don't feel powerful. I feel endorsed by the algorithm, which is basically the same thing.
Also, quick reminder, all our episodes are evergreen, meaning they're built to stay relevant and fun no matter when you listen. You can binge this in a year, and it'll still slap
like a good toga, timeless.
And if you've got a topic you want us to cover, slide into our social media DMs. Suggest an era, a person, a battle, a scandal, preferably a scandal.
Also, new merchandise. We've got it. It exists. There is a link in the show notes. And yes, we have debated whether Team Marco should be a shirt. It should.
Today, we're going deep on the battle. Well, the war, really, of Veii. Rome versus Veii. 10 years of stubbornness, a dramatic siege, a tunnel, and a finale that basically changes Rome forever.
It's got everything. Political drama, religious rituals, engineering, and the kind of long-term neighbor feud that ends with somebody flipping the entire table. Also be sure to stay tuned after the episode for the original song, 10 Years to Break a City.
So, let's set the stage, because the Battle of Veii, really the War of Veii, doesn't make sense unless you understand the vibe of early Italy. We're talking centuries before Rome is an empire. This is Rome when it's still rough around the edges. Less marble, more mud. Less SPQR, more please don't let the roof leak again.
Rome at this point is basically a teenager who just discovered lifting weights and won't stop talking about it.
Exactly, and just a short distance away, like close enough to be a constant problem, there's Veii, an Etruscan city, and not a small one. Wealthy, established, comfortable in its own power. Veii isn't improvising its way through statehood. It's got institutions, money, craft, trade connections, an actual grown-up city.
Veii is the neighbor with paved driveways, imported olive oil, and a smug little, "Oh, you're still doing that" smile.
And the geography matters here. Veii sits in a position that's strategically annoying for Rome. It's near the Tiber River region, close to important roads and fertile land. The land between them, fields, grazing space, access points to trade, those aren't abstract. In an ancient economy, their survival, their wealth, their status. Whoever controls that land controls the flow of goods and influence.
So it's not just, we don't like each other. It's every time I look out my window, I see you making money off the stuff I want.
And for Rome, that's a big deal. Because this is a phase where Rome's identity is still forming. It's a city trying to expand its influence across Latium, trying to secure itself, trying to prove it's not just one more settlement that might get swallowed by someone stronger.
Translation: Rome is insecure deeply.
Meanwhile, Veii is part of the Etruscan world, and the Etruscans have been shaping this region for a long time. They have a reputation for sophisticated urban life, planned cities, temples, powerful elites, major trade, and cultural influence that Rome itself has already felt. Rome's early kings, Rome's religious practices, some of Rome's public rituals, there are Etruscan fingerprints all over them.
Which is always hilarious when Rome later acts like it invented everything. It's like watching someone say, "I don't get influenced by anyone," while wearing their rival's jacket.
So the rivalry has layers. On paper, it's about territory. Who gets which fields, who controls which routes, who dominates which border zones. But emotionally, it's about prestige. Veii is a powerful neighbor and a constant reminder that Rome is not automatically the biggest kid on the block.
Veii is Rome's comparison spiral. Rome doomscrolls Veii.
And these two cities have history. There had been clashes and raids before the big, famous siege ever starts. This isn't a sudden war that comes out of nowhere. This is a long, simmering dispute that keeps flaring up, like a border argument that becomes a generational grudge.
My grandfather hated your grandfather, and now I'm obligated to keep the tradition alive.
Exactly. And that's the kind of conflict that can escalate because it becomes about honor and reputation. You can't back down without looking weak. And weakness in this world isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. If your neighbors think you're soft, they take your land, raid your farms, cut your trade, and suddenly your city's in trouble.
Ancient geopolitics, the meanest neighborhood watch imaginable.
So Rome starts pushing harder. It wants Veii's territory, sure, but it also wants what Veii represents: security, wealth, and the psychological victory of beating a sophisticated rival. This isn't just conquest for conquest's sake. It's Rome trying to remove a threat and replace it with itself.
Rome looked at Veii and said, I don't just want your stuff. I want your spot.
And for Veii, it's not like they're sitting there waiting to be conquered. They've got defenses, they've got confidence, they've got their own network of allies and rivals. Veii has every reason to believe it can outlast Rome, because in many ways it's better positioned, more established, more economically developed, more city in the way we imagine ancient cities.
Rome is the hungry upstart. Veii is the comfortable incumbent. That's the tension. That's the story.
Which is why this conflict matters. Because when Rome goes up against Veii, it's not just fighting a raid or a skirmish. It's testing itself against a peer, maybe even a superior. It's Rome asking, are we really who we think we are?
And Veii's answer at first is basically, no.
And that's how we arrive at the siege. Because once you pick this fight, you don't get to just shrug and walk away. If Rome is going to take Veii, it has to commit in a way it hasn't committed before.
Which is where things start to get very, very expensive.
So by the time we get into the siege phase, Rome isn't just poking Veii with raids anymore. This is a full commitment. They're basically saying, we're not leaving until this city breaks.
Which is a bold thing to say when the city in question has walls and food, and the kind of confidence that comes from being richer than you.
And that's the problem. Veii is fortified. It's on high ground, defended, and built for this kind of situation. You can't just rush a place like that and hope bravery does the job.
Early Rome is learning the hard lesson that enthusiasm is not a siege engine.
Traditionally, the story is remembered as a 10-year siege, and whether you take that number literally or as a way of saying this took forever, the point stands. This was not a quick victory. This drags. It becomes the kind of war that eats time, money, patience, everything.
It's basically the ancient equivalent of getting stuck in a project at work where everyone swears it's almost done. And then you look up and it's been 3 years and you don't remember who you were before it started.
And here's what's really important. This isn't just a military story, it's a social story. Because Rome, at this time, fights mostly with citizen soldiers, men who have farms, families, responsibilities. They don't have a professional standing army where people sign up and it's their whole career.
They're farmers who become soldiers when the city says so, and then they go back home and harvest. That's the rhythm.
Exactly. Except, you can't do that easily with a long siege. You can't just pack it in every season and hope the enemy politely stays hungry until you get back.
Hey Veii, can you pause being fortified? We have to go do agriculture.
So Rome faces a choice. Either drop the pressure and let Veii recover, or stay in the field and build a new kind of military commitment. And if Rome's going to win, it has to keep constant pressure on Veii, cutting off routes, maintaining a presence, preventing supplies from getting in, and stopping Veii from casually going, actually, we're fine.
So Rome starts acting like a city with imperial ambitions before it technically has them.
Yes, and that takes resources. It takes organization. It takes political will. And this is where the war starts messing with Rome's internal dynamics. Because once you're maintaining troops in the field for extended periods, somebody has to pay for it, feed them, equip them, and keep their families from collapsing back home.
And if you don't handle that, your soldiers don't just get tired, they get resentful. And resentful people with weapons are historically influential.
Rome is also dealing with tension between social classes, the elite families who hold power, and the broader citizen body who do most of the fighting and labor. A long siege puts pressure on that relationship. The wealthy can weather disruption more easily. The poor can't.
If you're rich, a 10-year siege is inconvenient. If you're not, it's existential.
And because it's existential, the city has to adapt. The tradition that comes down to us emphasizes that Rome begins to move toward paying soldiers during extended campaigns, because otherwise you're asking people to abandon their livelihoods indefinitely.
Which is basically Rome realizing, oops, We accidentally invented the concept of a military payroll.
Exactly. It's one of those moments where necessity forces institutional change. The siege becomes a kind of engine that turns early Rome into a more capable state.
Veii isn't just resisting conquest. Veii is forcing Rome to become the kind of monster that can conquer.
Meanwhile, out at the siege lines, it's not glamorous. This isn't a single dramatic battle day. It's camps, patrols, skirmishes, supply runs, fortifying positions, trying to keep morale up when the walls are still standing month after month.
Imagine being a Roman soldier on year 7, looking at Veii like, I have watched the same wall exist for so long, I think it's aging better than I am.
And Veii, to be clear, is not passive. A city under siege looks for openings, raids against the besiegers, attempts to break blockades, opportunistic attacks when Rome is stretched thin.
Because even when you're trapped, you can still punch somebody in the face if they're standing too close to your door.
Exactly. And Rome is learning that sieges are psychological wars as much as physical ones. You're trying to convince the people inside that resistance is pointless, while convincing your own people outside that persistence is worth it.
It's two crowds staring at each other, each thinking, surely they'll quit first.
And the longer it goes, the more the war becomes political back in Rome. Leaders rise and fall on whether they can promise progress. People argue over strategy, over cost, over who's benefiting, over whether this is glory or stupidity.
And you know somebody in the forum is doing the ancient version of, have we tried not doing this?
But Rome can't back down easily, because after committing this hard, leaving would signal weakness, not just to Veii, but to every neighbor watching. If Veii survives, Rome looks like it reached too high and got slapped down.
And Rome absolutely cannot handle being embarrassed in public.
Which brings us to the turning point. After years of grinding, Rome decides it needs a decisive figure and a decisive plan, somebody who can cut through the stalemate, rally the city, and end the siege.
In other words, it's time for the fine, I'll do it myself guy to walk on stage.
Exactly, and that's when Camillus enters the story.
And the vibe shifts from slow suffering to legend being manufactured in real time.
So Rome turns to Marcus Furius Camillus, one of those names that shows up in Roman tradition like a stamped seal of authority. When the story wants you to feel, okay, now it's serious, it brings in Camillus.
He's the kind of guy the sources treat like a cinematic cutscene. The music changes, the lighting gets dramatic, everyone suddenly starts speaking in confident sentences.
And he's appointed dictator, which, quick reminder, doesn't mean tyrant in the modern sense. In the Roman Republic, dictator is an emergency office. You give one person extraordinary authority for a limited time because the situation is stuck and you need decisions made fast.
So basically Rome goes, we're done arguing, we're giving one guy the wheel. Please don't crash the cart.
Camillus takes over a siege that has been dragging forever. Morale is frayed, patience is thin, and everyone's sick of staring at Veii's walls like they're a personal insult.
I love how walls can become emotional in war. Like the wall is just sitting there, being a wall, and the Romans are outside like, look at it, it thinks it's better than us.
And Camillus, at least in the traditional telling, does two things at once. First, he tightens military discipline and coordination. If you've got an army sitting around for years, you need structure, or it turns into a resentful outdoor city with weapons.
A very cranky campground.
Second, he reframes the war. Not just as we want that city, but as this is Rome's destiny. That language matters, because long wars require a story that people can live inside.
You can endure a lot if you believe it means something. If you think it's pointless, you start counting days and resenting every meal.
And here's where the Roman tradition gets really theatrical. We start seeing the religious dimension come forward, omens, vows, rituals. In Roman storytelling, big turning points rarely happen without the gods being consulted, bribed, or dramatically involved.
The Romans had a very transactional relationship with divinity. Hello, gods. If you help us win, we will build you a nice building and promise to behave for a while.
Exactly. Camillus is remembered as making vows to deities, and the whole effort gets framed as morally sanctioned. The war becomes not just a struggle of armies, but a contest of favor, whose gods are stronger, whose rituals are done correctly, whose destiny is legit.
Which is convenient, because if you win, it proves your gods are awesome. If you lose, it proves you did the ritual wrong. Either way, the theology stays employed.
Now, the strategic masterstroke, the thing people love to retell, is the tunnel. Roman sources describe a plan to dig beneath the city's defenses, bypassing the walls entirely.
The walls are up there, doing their job, and meanwhile, the Romans are down below, doing the ancient equivalent of work smarter, not harder.
And tunnel warfare is hard. It takes time, engineering knowledge, secrecy, and a workforce that can keep digging without everyone in Veii noticing the earth literally being removed from under their feet.
Also, think of the morale factor. If you're a Roman soldier, you've spent years watching the walls not fall. A tunnel feels like hope you can hold in your hands. It feels like we're finally doing something that isn't just waiting.
According to the traditional narrative, the tunnel is timed with a major religious moment inside Veii, some ceremonial focus that distracts the defenders or concentrates attention elsewhere.
So Veii is up there having a sacred moment, and Rome is like, cool, we'll be right there.
And then there's one of the most famous pieces of Roman religious symbolism in this whole story, the idea that Rome calls or invites Veii's protective deity, often described as Juno Regina, to abandon Veii and come to Rome instead.
Which is wild. It's basically Rome saying, hey, we know you're protecting them, but have you considered our benefits package?
And it's not just mythology for flavor. It's political. If you can claim that even Veii's gods switched sides, you're not just conquering a city, you're legitimizing the conquest. You're saying the fall was inevitable, cosmically approved, and therefore morally clean.
We didn't defeat you. Your own spiritual security detail resigned.
Exactly. So now the tunnel is ready. The final move is set. After years of stalemate, Rome finally has a way inside.
And you can feel it in the story. This is the moment the siege stops being a slow grind and becomes a punchline, because the walls never get breached from the outside. The victory comes from below.
The Romans break through into the city, and the fighting shifts from siege lines to street-level chaos.
That's the scary part. A siege is brutal, but it's predictable. A breach, especially a surprise one, is panic, confusion, people not knowing where the enemy is coming from.
Veii, the city that held out for years, suddenly loses the one advantage it had, the protection of its walls and the clarity of a single front.
Because once the enemy is inside, the game changes. You're not defending a perimeter, you're defending everything.
And in the Roman telling, this is where Camillus becomes the hero who delivers the decisive victory. The siege ends not with a negotiated surrender, but with a dramatic capture.
Which is also Rome sending a message. We can do patience, we can do persistence, and when we finally decide to end something, we end it.
And that brings us to the fall of Veii itself. What happens when a major city collapses, what Rome takes, and how Rome changes afterward.
Because winning a war isn't just a victory lap, it's paperwork, politics, and a whole new identity crisis.
So Veii falls, and I want to pause on that because it's easy to hear Rome took a city and mentally file it under Roman Tuesday. But this is early Rome. This is not a casual conquest. This is a major rival getting knocked off the board.
Yeah, it's not like Rome is out here speedrunning Italy yet. Taking Veii is like beating the toughest boss in the first region and suddenly realizing the game just got bigger.
Exactly. Veii isn't some random village with a fence. It's a wealthy, fortified Etruscan city with influence and resources. When Rome takes it, Rome doesn't just gain bragging rights. It gains land, wealth, strategic breathing room, and something even more valuable, confidence.
Rome basically looks in the mirror afterward and goes, oh wow, we can actually do this.
And the land part matters more than people sometimes realize. Ancient power isn't just armies. It's fields, grazing land, access to roads, control of river crossings, space for colonies, space for settlement. Veii's territory is a big expansion of Rome's footprint.
So Rome isn't just taking a city, it's taking a future. It's taking the resources that let it keep fighting other wars.
Right. The victory turns into momentum. And traditionally, the spoils are enormous. Booty, treasure, captives, all the grim realities of ancient conquest. The kind of influx that can reshape your economy and your politics, because suddenly there's more to fight over back home.
Nothing brings people together like victory, and nothing tears them apart like deciding who gets the shiny stuff afterward.
And here's where we get into the Roman habit of turning every major event into a domestic dispute. Because once Veii is taken, the question becomes, what do we do with it?
The reasonable answer would be, we won. Great, let's be normal for 5 minutes. But Rome doesn't have that setting.
Not even close. Some Romans want to distribute the land to citizens. Some want to plant new settlements. Some want to move people. Some want to keep the spoils tightly controlled. And beneath all of that are the same tensions we talked about earlier: class divisions, political factions, and the fact that long wars create winners and losers even among the victors.
Like, if you're a soldier who spent years outside Veii, you're thinking, I better come home to something more than blisters and memories.
And if you're an elite politician, you're thinking, this victory is my ticket to power, which means you need the story of the victory to land in a way that benefits you.
Which is where our guy Camillus becomes controversial, because of course he does.
Of course. In the tradition, Camillus is the hero who delivered Veii, but heroes in Rome are rarely allowed to just stay heroes. There are accusations, arguments over the spoils, claims that he didn't distribute things fairly, or that he's acting like he's above the rules, or that he's taking too much credit.
Rome loves a successful general, right up until the moment it suspects he might enjoy being successful.
Exactly. And this is important because it shows Rome's political culture. There's a constant fear of any one individual becoming too dominant. Even when Rome needs a strongman in an emergency, it immediately snaps back to, okay, now get back in your lane.
It's like Rome has a built-in reflex. Congrats on saving the state. Now please stop being impressive.
There's also the religious layer. In some versions of the story, there are concerns about vows made to the gods, about proper rituals, about whether the spoils were handled in the correct sacred manner. Because in Roman thinking, politics and religion aren't separate lanes. They're the same road.
Rome is basically a society where even the paperwork has a shrine attached to it.
But stepping back from the drama for a second, Veii's fall changes Rome materially. Rome now has more territory than it's ever had before. It has removed a major rival close to home. It has proven it can sustain a long campaign and win through persistence and planning.
It's like Rome just unlocked a new skill tree: siegecraft, logistics, and political chaos after victory.
And it's also absorbing Etruscan influence in a deeper way. Rome already had Etruscan connections culturally, but conquering an Etruscan city means contact becomes incorporation. Art, techniques, religious practices, symbols of status.
Rome doesn't just conquer people, it collects them. It's like a museum that marches.
Now here's the twist that makes this story feel almost cruel. Even after this massive victory, Rome is not suddenly safe forever. In fact, in the traditional timeline, not too long after Veii, Rome faces new disasters and new threats.
Which is history's way of saying, congrats, now here's a brand new problem.
But Veii still matters, because it's one of the clearest early examples of Rome expanding through total victory, taking land, transforming the political landscape, and setting itself on a trajectory where conquest becomes not an occasional act, but a strategy.
It's the moment Rome starts acting like Rome.
And that leads us into the big question: why does this story stick? Why do Romans keep retelling Veii like it's a foundational myth?
Because it's a victory story, but it's also a becoming story. Rome becomes the thing it's going to be later, right here, in the dirt, outside Veii's walls.
Exactly. And that's where we go next: the legacy, the myth-making, and why a tunnel under an Etruscan city still lives rent-free in the Roman imagination.
And in my imagination too, honestly. I'm never trusting a basement again.
So why does the Veii story stick around? Why does it keep showing up in Roman memory like a greatest hits track? Because it's not just a win, it's a narrative Rome can build its identity around. Stubborn, resourceful, favored by the gods, and ultimately inevitable.
It's Rome's origin montage. Except instead of learning karate, it's learning how to outlast a city for a decade and then sneak in through the floor like a vindictive plumber.
And the 10-year part, whether it's literal or symbolic, matters because it makes the victory feel earned. The longer the struggle, the more satisfying the ending. Rome doesn't just defeat Veii, it endures it.
Which is very Roman. Rome's whole brand is basically, you can't wear us out. We will outlast you emotionally.
It also gives Rome a convenient comparison point. In later Roman storytelling, Veii becomes the rival that proves Rome can take down a peer, not just push around weaker neighbors. You beat Veii, and suddenly you're allowed to dream bigger.
It's like winning your first real fight and realizing, oh no, I'm going to start doing this professionally.
And because Veii is Etruscan, the story also helps Rome position itself as the inheritor of what came before. This isn't just conquest, it's Rome stepping into a role. If the Etruscans represent an older, sophisticated order in Italy, then Rome beating Veii becomes Rome inheriting that crown.
Rome loves inheritance stories. We didn't take it, we were meant to have it. That's the vibe.
The tunnel is a big part of that myth-making because it tells a very specific story about Roman virtues: patience, discipline, ingenuity. You couldn't force the walls. Fine. You changed the rules. You put in the work no one saw, and then the city fell in a moment.
It's the ancient version of quiet quitting. Except it's quiet digging. And then suddenly you're in someone's living room with a sword.
It also taps into something universally compelling: the idea that the strongest defenses fail when someone finds an unexpected way around them. That's a timeless narrative. It's in myths, it's in heist stories, it's in modern thrillers. The point isn't just that Veii had walls, it's that Rome learned to stop treating the walls as the whole problem.
If the door is locked, become the floor. That's Rome.
And then there's the religious layer, which makes the story feel bigger than tactics. Romans didn't just want to remember events, they wanted to remember meaning. Omens, vows, divine favor. Those pieces turn a war into destiny.
Also, it's a very convenient way to explain victory. Like, we won because we were right, and we were right because we won.
Exactly. It's circular, but it's powerful. When you tell yourself your city is chosen, every win reinforces that belief, and every belief fuels the next win.
It's self-propulsion. Rome is like a boulder rolling downhill that keeps shouting, I'm doing this on purpose.
And look at how the story treats Camillus. He's the hero who ends the suffering, the leader who makes the decisive move, the man who embodies the state's strength, and then immediately becomes a target of political resentment.
Which makes the story feel more human, honestly. Because of course, people are going to argue after a victory. Of course, they're going to accuse him of grabbing too much credit or wealth. It's the eternal tradition. You can't have a big win without somebody at home saying, okay, but did you fill out the forms correctly?
That tension becomes part of the Roman identity too. Rome as a place that's always negotiating between individual glory and collective control.
Rome wants heroes, but it also wants to keep heroes on a leash. Preferably a short leash. Preferably a leash made of laws and shouting.
So the Veii story works on multiple levels. It's a military victory. It's a political drama. It's a religious morality tale. It's an engineering flex. And it's a cultural moment where Rome begins to see itself not just as one city in a crowded region, but as the city that will define the region.
And it's also a warning, right? Like to everyone else. Because if you're some other city watching this, you're thinking, they did that to Veii, they'll do it to us.
Exactly. Rome doesn't just defeat Veii, it broadcasts a message. It says we can commit, we can adapt, and we can take what we decide we want.
And suddenly, every neighbor is checking their own walls like, are we tunnel-proof?
Which takes us into the final stretch. What we should actually take away from this story when we're not wearing a toga and arguing in the forum.
The lessons that survive the centuries. The evergreen part.
Exactly. Let's bring it home. So when we wrap up Veii, I keep coming back to this. It's not just that Rome won. It's how Rome won and what the effort did to Rome in the process. This wasn't a quick smash and grab. It was long, expensive, exhausting. So exhausting that the city had to change the way it fought just to keep fighting.
Which is one of history's nastiest tricks. Sometimes the war you choose doesn't just defeat your enemy, it redesigns
Veii
you.
forces Rome into endurance mode. It pushes Rome toward longer campaigns, better logistics, and the idea that you can't rely on seasonal bursts forever if you want to dominate. And once a society figures out how to sustain that kind of pressure, it's hard to unlearn it.
It's like Rome accidentally discovered it has a never-stop setting. And once you find that button, you start pressing it a lot.
And the story is evergreen because we still recognize the mechanics. Rivalry that's half resources, half pride. A conflict that drags on long enough to stress the home front. A victory that's celebrated and then immediately becomes a political fight over spoils, credit, and who gets to write the official version
The oldest tradition on Earth. Congrats on winning. Now let's argue about it until everyone's mad.
Veii also shows how power absorbs what it conquers. Rome doesn't just eliminate Veii as a rival. It takes the land, the position, the influence, and then turns it into fuel. That's one of the most important patterns in Roman history. Rome is learning early on that conquest isn't just a moment, it's a system.
And the tunnel is the perfect symbol for that, because it's not about brute force. It's about patience, planning, and refusing to accept the problem as it's presented. Veii says, "You can't get through our walls," and Rome says, "Okay, we
So
won't."
if you remember anything from this episode, remember Veii as a turning point. Rome meeting a true match, getting stuck, adapting, and coming out the other side, more dangerous, more capable, and more convinced of its own destiny.
Veii didn't just lose a war. It helped create the Rome that would win so many more.
And that's the story, not just a siege, but a transformation. Thanks for listening to the History AI podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. We mean it. Those 5 stars really do help the podcast grow and help more people find the show.
It's the easiest way to support us, and it makes a huge difference. Rate it, review it, and if you're feeling generous, share it with a friend who enjoys history, strategy, or extremely petty ancient rivalries.
And special thanks to all of you who keep coming back episode after episode. You're the reason we get to keep making these evergreen stories, episodes you can listen to anytime and still get something out of.
Also remember, if there's a topic you want us to cover next, message us on social media. Suggest a battle, a leader, a mystery, a scandal. Feed us the good stuff.
And don't forget, we've got new merchandise. Link in the show notes.
Wear it while digging suspicious tunnels under your enemy's emotional defenses.
We'll be back next time with more history, more banter, and more stories that never expire. Until then, rate, subscribe, and if you haven't yet, that 5-star review helps the show grow.
Later, everyone.
Dust on the wall, stone against time, Etruscan pride in every line. High above the river's bend, they swore that Veii would never end. Fields burned black where soldiers fell, Roman horns and a distant yell. A war that stretched through blood and years, 10 long winters, 10 long fears. And every night the fires would glow, 2 great worlds locked below. 10 years to break a city, 10 years to wear it down, through hunger, steel and shadows, till silence took the crown. No glory in the waiting, no mercy in the fight, just Rome beneath the surface, and Veii in the night. Tunnels carved through earth and bone, a silent path where none had known. Beneath their feet the legions crept, while Veii laughed and Veii slept. Camillus watched with iron eyes, no wasted breath, no grand disguise. Not by storm, but by the ground, would Veii fall without a sound. A whisper breaks the stone below, a final move they'll never know. 10 years to break a city, 10 years to claim the flame. No walls can stand forever, no gods will stay the same. The gates were never shattered, the sky never turned red, just Rome ancient fire. They sang of strength, of pride, desire. But deep below where silence grows, the end was closer than they know. A sudden cry, a broken line, a sacred place undone in time. The city falls from the inside. No place to run, no place to hide. 10 years, 10 years, for one moment in the dark. No warning, no mercy, just the sound of Rome's mark. 10 years to break a city, 10 years to end its name. From Veii's ashes rising, a new and ruthless flame. No kings left in the silence, no banners left to fly. Just Rome above the ruins, and echoes asking why. Stone turns to dust, stories remain. Victory carved through patience and pain. And somewhere beneath, where the old world lies, Rome took a city and never looked